Deleted session, January 3rd, 1973. Now, good evening. This is not dictation. Most individuals that will focus so rigidly in your particular area of space and time that the greater dimensionality of the entity is unknown to them at a conscious level. Any interactions from other layers of actuality are promptly shut down. They are considered as not self, dangerous, or alien. Only in the dream state, in any such communication allowed. The greater reality of the self is therefore largely unsuspected, and the great knowledge possessed by it remains unknown at a conscious level. The conscious mind, however, is evolving in your terms. It is not the finished product. You may include this information in my book, but it is not book dictation. Creativity, as it is generally known, represents but a small portion of far more extensive capacities. Creativity, as you understand, it is the three-dimensional aspect then of greater abilities that belong to our conscious innately, whether it is consciously materialized or not. When it is so materialized, much of the creativity is automatically expressed, the individual being aware of only that ability that the mind can understand. Most individuals, therefore, do not contend with larger portions of their own reality. An individual sets for himself those challenges that lie within his range at any given time. He does not tackle challenges that in his turn are too great to be solved. Now, through the years, Schubert has been more and more aware of other kinds of psychological realities and structures than those usually experienced. He was born with that capacity, having chosen the course. The capacity was there then long before it showed itself. Earlier, he experienced high accelerations of creativity and consciousness. These accelerations and the capacity activated the thyroid gland, not the other way around. He sensed the energy, of course, and considered it one of his characteristics, but it frightened him. He had definite ideas of the ways in which energy should properly be used and channeled. He was afraid of going too far too fast and worse, of going alone. Controls were applied as he learned to experience and use his growing abilities. The fears about being an official psychic were to see that he did not fall into the temptation of allowing all the dogmas to be tacked upon the phenomena, so that he would not operate within old frameworks, and therefore tacitly give voice consent to them. In all of this, you also acquiesced. It was known that only by presenting the material in writing and eventually in books that his personality would accept it. He would also be driven to critically analyze the phenomena, and in books because he is a writer, before he felt free enough to simply create. The critical writing and the symptoms went hand in hand. They were both cautionary procedures, symbolic and literal, that he felt necessary. Until his own understanding of his nature and the nature of consciousness progressed, he needed those tactics. You recognized them as signs of caution and acquiesced. The freedom of 7 was the first sign to release, but not accepted on all levels. You understand, though imperfectly, what happens when you are between beliefs. Sure that one is no longer adequate, unable to rely upon it as you once did, but not yet able to fully accept another. Now, until Rupert's psychic experiences and the beginning of this expansion of consciousness and abilities, He was used to relying upon other levels of trust. He identified completely with his body. Afterward, he could not identify with his body in the same way. A whole new orientation became necessary, and it did involve a time of stress. The reasons given still apply, but all within this greater framework. The body's needs to some extent even have changed. Now, much of this would have frightened you both in the past, and could not have been given until you reached a particular point of development, and achieved a new status both separately and in your relationship. This is a significant session. I will let you take a break and continue. Now, in your own way, you have done the same thing, and for the same reasons. As far as your work is concerned, you have tried guardedly to interpret greater experience in old ways, using old, in quotes, channels that are adequate for usual creativity in art, but painfully restrictive as far as you are concerned. I will have much more to say to you regarding that. You kept insisting on trying to portray new vision by using methods that could not contain it, and did not spontaneously allow your visions to flow into their own forms. I will return to this later this evening. Give us a moment. The expansions of consciousness on Rupert's part did involve some natural feelings of disorientation with his body and the world, that all in all were handled supremely well. With the development of abilities, however, the importance of conscious thought became greater than before. The mind in one way was becoming more aware of reality, using greater energy and taking ever greater responsibility, which it did not bear to that degree before. The acceleration of mental creativity, therefore, meant that the creative energy of thought became ever greater in practical terms. Do you follow me? Ralph said, yes. They said, old stray patterns of thought, therefore, or depressions, became more readily materialized, as did more positive ones, to your way of thinking. Both positive and negative elements were more quickly creatively materialized. It is almost, and most symbolically, as if Rupert were born at age 36 into a world with new rules, to which he had then to acclimate himself. The expansion of consciousness is large enough to become a different kind of consciousness, if it has allowed freedom. He held back in the ways given. You held back from many of the experiences that you could yourself encounter, and you are now ready to begin an acceleration of our own that will be largely interpreted through your work, if you allow it. You also felt that Rupert needed you, particularly in the beginning, with both of your feet on the ground, so to speak. Rupert is quite correct. In its way, this session is as important as our initial ones. When you want a break, interrupt me. Otherwise, I will continue for a while. Ralph said, okay. They said Rupert's cautionary attitude was his way of maintaining balance. Usually, his particular kind of development takes place in two lives, in your turns. Your own unswerving desire to paint is your impetus, as writing was Rupert's, and is, so that your knowledge would be interpreted in those terms, as, if you continue, it will be. I am going to outline a program. The suggestions will not be given in order necessarily. Rupert must do his own creative work in his writing hours. He must, for his health's sake, take at least 15 minutes a day to relax in any fashion he chooses. But mental and physical relaxation. This is not diversion such as television. You follow me? He is not to feel at the demand of letters, people, calls, or otherwise. He is to feel free of those demands. They are not a part of his work. My book is geared specifically to people. When he realizes he need not be at their demand, he can be freely grateful for his mail and not resentful. An honest, warm letter will be dictated by me to be sent out. This absolves him from such responsibility neatly, and it is important that he be so absolved, not only for his own benefit, but for other work, from which such demands detract. For now, class should be continued. Your social life should and must not be allowed to deteriorate. You both need that contact, but free you see of the demands he has felt from, say, correspondence. Nor need he feel at the beck and call of anyone who wants to come here for a session or otherwise. No need he feel a responsibility to allow people to come to class from afar, but that might, generally speaking, represent his contact with others psychically. He should speak to her. As he mentioned, and that is important, her will serve in your place in classes unless you attend. Her can serve in that capacity, but it is important now that someone does. Are you ready? Rob said, yes. They said there are to be some recommendations for diet. Some changes in his taste have already occurred, to his surprise. He no longer enjoys raw steak as he used to, or even steak particularly, for example. He finds himself naturally wanting grains such as rice and cereals, and has a yearning for potatoes, baked. His diet and yours should follow the following patterns. For him, particularly, except for bacon, which is dried, very little pork. Steak, if you will excuse me, only on rare occasions. For him, emphasis on potatoes in all forms, except deep fried, and greens, spinach, turnip greens, and the like. Citrus fruits for him should largely be avoided, particularly with milk together. All other fruits, however, should be better utilized in, and you must be free enough to cast aside the shackles that invisibly surround the field of painting, and even your own interpretation of it. There are ways that Rupert can be of invaluable assistance. Some incidents will occur in our sessions, and some in your coordinated nap periods, as well as in a dream state, and within a few months if these suggestions are followed. Now, the two of you are growing together in new ways, in which your individual aspects are enhanced. But through this, or because of it, a greater joint energy becomes possible, in which all the abilities of your consciousness expand. It will be a most illuminating year. Give us a moment. Your physical situation will change, and one day you will live closer to the sea, though not directly on its edge. Rupert's grandfather was correct. You need a house open to the four winds. Now I bid you a fond good evening after a highly significant session. Russ said, thank you. They said, for you must go on in the way I have directed if you want to fulfill those abilities and purposes that you both have. And that is the end of the session. Russ said, "Good night, Seth, and thank you." They said, "The vitamins mentioned apply to you also, though not the extra one, just the complete capsule. You should make all efforts to move by spring. In the meantime, Rupert should blaze, in course, the bed, in whatever way he chooses, because of old aspects picked up when you were ill. There are differences between the two halves of the house, having to do with subterranean waterways and old gas pockets. You had better let me continue with the information while it flows. The area since the flood is not as healthy as it was, having to do with mines that were flooded. Seek high water. It is purer. Do you follow me?" Russ said, "I think so." They said, "That is the end. My best regards to you both." Russ said, "Thank you very much. Good night, Seth."